Welcome to this explainer. Today we are getting straight to the point to give you a complete, absolutely BS-free teardown of Web3. We're going to separate the utopian hype from the harsh reality, looking at this entire space from top to bottom. So no fluff, no endless technical tangents, just the core insights you actually need to understand where the internet is heading. Let's get right into it.
To make sure we don't waste your time, here's exactly how we're breaking this down. First, we'll trace the evolution to Web3. Then, we'll dig into its actual technical backbone, follow that up with the real-world legal catch-up going on right now, and finally, we'll unpack what some call the decentralization illusion. Basically, we're going from concept to code to courtrooms and straight onto the critics.
All right, kicking things off with the evolution to Web3. To really grasp where this technology is trying to take us, we first have to understand the specific bottlenecks of the internet that made it necessary in the first place.
We hear the buzzword literally everywhere, right? But if you strip away all the marketing jargon, what are we actually left with? Well, at its core, Web3 is a proposed paradigm shift. It's a massive attempt to rip the power away from those massive tech monopolies and hand the control and, let's be honest, the monetization of your digital life back to you.
Now, this term wasn't just born yesterday. It was actually coined way back in 2014 by Ethereum co-founder Gavin Wood. He defined it pretty simply as a decentralized online ecosystem based on blockchain. But you have to remember, this wasn't just some technical upgrade. It was a direct rebellion against a handful of big tech companies who had, frankly, amassed unprecedented and completely unchecked control over all of our private data.
The evolution here is actually incredibly straightforward. Think about it. Web 1 was static, you just read it. Web 2 became interactive. You generated the content, but the platforms hoarded all the authority and the profits. Then Web 3 introduces this massive, disruptive shift where you read, you write, and crucially, you actually own your digital assets. It's user-generated content finally meeting user-generated authority.
When you contrast the two side by side, the ambition is just so clear. Web 2 basically forces you to trust a central corporation with your data, relying on traditional fiat money systems. Web 3, on the other hand, aims for what we call a trustless system. So instead of a bank or a tech giant acting as this digital toll booth where you have to pay to play, Web 3 uses cryptography. This means you can transact peer-to-peer, completely bypassing the middleman.
Okay, that brings us to the technical backbone. Let's look at the actual anatomy of this decentralized stack. And we're going to build it from the ground up, kind of like we're constructing a skyscraper.
To really understand the architecture, we have to look at the stark difference in network topologies. Picture a centralized network as having just one main hub. If that single point fails, or if it decides to deplatform you, boom, your lights go out. But as we move toward distributed networks, control is devolved evenly across the entire internet. It's literally the structural difference between a fragile dictatorship and a highly resilient, dispersed web.
And the bedrock foundation of this Web3 skyscraper is, of course, the blockchain. Rather than some centralized database locked away in a corporate server room, this is a distributed ledger. It permanently records transactions across thousands of computers all at once, which creates this immutable foundation where bad actors just can't go in and secretly alter the history.
So, with the foundation poured, we add the plumbing and the wiring, smart contracts. These are self-executing programs that sit directly on the blockchain. And they aren't just passive storage, okay? They are the automated gears of Web3. The logic is incredibly simple. If X happens, Y is automatically triggered. No lawyers, no escrow accounts, no mutual trust required. The code just executes itself.
Finally, we furnish our building with rooms and tenants. You have dApps, decentralized applications, that run locally so you retain total data sovereignty. And governing all of this, you have DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. Think of a DAO like a corporate boardroom run entirely by code and community voting, without a traditional CEO anywhere in sight.
But here is where we hit the real-world legal catch-up. Because we have to ask, how does this borderless, decentralized utopia actually survive when it crashes into the ground floor of nation-states, tax authorities, and actual physical courtrooms?
Early crypto purists love the theory that structures like DAOs were completely untouchable by regulators because they lived outside national borders. But reality is biting back and hard. A scoping paper from Justice UK, right alongside some really aggressive actions by US regulators against entities like the Oki DAO, makes one thing crystal clear. The law is catching up rapidly, no matter how decentralized your code claims to be.
Looking ahead to frameworks like the 2026 UK crypto regulations, the Wild West is officially getting fenced in. Web3 startups just can no longer hide behind a cloak of decentralization. This new roadmap requires strict regulatory gap analyses, incredibly complex VASP-style licensing, and official FCA authorizations just to hold assets. So the barrier to entry, it's getting dramatically steeper.
Which brings us to the decentralization illusion. Let's head down into the basement of our Web3 building for a second and objectively examine the cracks in the foundation, specifically where these grand utopian promises are falling violently short in practice.
Web3 preaches this beautiful vision of pure democratization. But man, look at the stark contrast between theory and practice here. Actually navigating these systems requires deep technical expertise and massive upfront capital. The dark irony is that Web3 might successfully shift power away from today's big tech monopolies, only to drop it directly into the laps of a new, highly privileged tech elite.
Researchers are actually calling this the double-edged sword of decentralization. By creating these highly complex, gate-kept systems, Web3 risks doing exactly what it promised not to do, which is replicating the very power imbalances it set out to destroy. Are we really removing the masters? Or might we just be changing their names?
Add to that, the mainstream pushback is immense. Tech heavyweights like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey have publicly dismissed Web3 as nothing more than a marketing buzzword. But even beyond the banter, there are major structural alarms going off. The centralization of wealth to early whales who basically hoard all the voting power, not to mention the ongoing environmental toll of blockchains. The academic consensus right now is pretty sobering. Pure decentralization is a myth. There's always going to be a trade-off between safety, efficiency, and true user control. So as hybrid models continue to evolve, trying to somehow marry decentralized tech with real-world law, I want to leave you with this to ponder. Is Web3 truly the democratized future of the internet, or just a new set of digital landlords? Having looked at it straight to the point from top to bottom, will it actually fulfill its promise, or is this whole decentralization illusion just Web 2 in a different disguise? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.